I'm Sven Masterson, one of the co-founders and mentors in the Mentoring Men community. And in this video, I want to respond to a comment left on one of our other videos in which a man named Henry said the following. He said, "How do you desire someone who's critical and negative at every turn? I can't even paint a small corner in a guest bedroom that only relatives go in once per year without criticism of why I'm doing it. Why don't I call someone to make sure I'm doing it right? The color doesn't match. Why did I use that tape and not the other one?" I literally throw tools away in the garage because she makes us go through things and get rid of them. I just had to cut a steel post the other day with a Sawzall and buy new blades because I threw my grinder out because, quote, I don't use it enough. The post was cemented and had a rebar in it. It took me 1.5 hours. It should have taken 15 minutes. Constant criticism. Now, when I saw this note from Henry, I could really relate to this. I've been in a relationship with my wife Zelda for 31 years. We've been married for almost 29 of that. And I know for about 2/3 of my relationship, I felt like Henry. I felt constantly critiqued. I'm a handy guy. I've done a lot of work in my house. I might have just finished a big months and months long project, and my wife would walk in and say, "Why isn't that done? Where is that thing? Is that board going to stay like that?" And I used to get incredulous. I used to feel so irritated and exasperated and discouraged when she would do that. And I didn't understand, like Henry, what was going on. I didn't understand why I had the emotional reactions I had, and it was a very disconnecting thing in our relationship. And you know, a lot has changed in the last 10 years of my relationship. I've learned a number of things. I've gotten wiser, older men in my life who've actually helped me to navigate some of these spaces. And now my relationship isn't like Henry's. It's flourishing. My wife doesn't critique me. There isn't criticism in my relationship. We have a deeply connected, passionate, and intimate relationship where my wife actually sees my best, not just my mistakes. And she doesn't ask me 1,000 questions about my motivations for why I do this or why I didn't do that. Now, Henry, I want to share with you 5 transitions that had to take place in my life to move from the kind of marriage that you're living in to the kind of marriage that I'm living in. And so I'm going to give you 5 transitions, and I'm going to give you 5 tools, since you're a tool guy, even though your tools are finding their way into the garbage. And I'm sorry about that. Okay, so the first transition, Henry, I want you to learn about is to learn to move from a sense of injury to a sense of immunity. To learn from going from injury to a sense of immunity. It's clear in your words that you feel injured by these things. That when your wife comes in and you're painting a guest room and she says something and she asks questions about tape or why didn't you check on something, that you're being personally injured by this. And so the tool that you need as a man to overcome a sense of injury and replace it with a sense of immunity is the tool we call emotional resiliency. Now, emotional resiliency means how fast do you return to a state of grounded, calm, peaceful, and at ease as a man? And how easy is it to move you out of that? And so an emotionally resilient man is not easily moved out of his state of calm by what other people do, especially. And if he finds himself outside of his state of equilibrium, his state of feeling at peace and grounded, he knows how to get back there quickly, and he can do it without a change in other people. Now, that level of emotional resiliency is not an overnight thing that we can do. We have to learn how to be emotionally resilient, and that takes a little bit of work. Now, fortunately, in the Mentoring Men community, part of our membership includes an included course that is a great introduction to emotional resiliency. It's called the Emotionally Resilient Man, and it's a great way how to learn not to be bothered by things other people say and do and think and express, and instead to learn to feel a sense of immunity to things like your wife is saying. And that goes a long way in life and in marriage. And so that's your first transition that I want you to think about making. injury to immunity, and the tool, once again, is emotional resiliency. Now, your second tool that you need to learn, or transition you need to learn, is to move from being irate to being intrigued. Now, this has to come second because you're going to be irate to the extent that you're not an emotionally resilient man. Because as long as someone can trigger you by things they say, do, think, and express, you don't actually have the resiliency and the fortitude as a man to be anything but irate. You're going to have an emotional reaction. And so once you learn to be emotionally resilient as a man, you'll find that you're no longer irate, that you can choose. I'm not going to be irate by these questions. She's got a comment about tape, and I'm not going to be irate about it. And instead, what you can do is become curious and intrigued. And so when you're intrigued, it means that when your wife asks you questions about did you call someone? Why are you painting it that color? Why are you using this tape? Then instead of having an emotional reaction within yourself, you can just be curious and say, I wonder why she's asking that question. I'm intrigued. What is it that's so important to you about these things? And instead of having that emotional reaction, you can take the moment instead and experience it as intrigue. Now, your tool here to experience this transformation and transition is a tool we call presence. Not like Christmas presents, presence, Presence, right? Did I spell it right? Which is being able to be in this moment and not up in your head and in the stories about what your wife's questions mean. And so presence is actually a real gift. It's actually the ability to bring back everything that's swirling within us right now to what is happening in reality in this moment. And when I'm present, I can be curious. I could say, you know what? None of her questions or comments are actually causing me injury. I'm actually okay right now. There's nothing bad going on here. This is simply a woman who's having a moment, a perspective of what's going on here. And I'm not at risk. I'm not about to experience loss. I'm not bleeding. I'm not on fire, etc., right? I'm safe. And so when I take the moment to experience presence, I can actually then say, okay, well, if I'm okay, I can be intrigued. I can find out more about what's going on. And so one of the quick ways to become present, there's two things I use on a day-to-day basis to maintain presence. The first one is just breathing, is to become aware of my inhales and exhales. It takes about 3 to 5 cycles of that for me just to remember, hey, I'm okay. And while, while I'm experiencing those inhales and exhales, I'm also expressing the second thing that I use to stay present, which is gratitude, which is just a gratefulness for the moment. Hey, thank you for this air. I'm grateful for being okay right now. I'm grateful for the sunshine outside. I'm grateful to have a person in my life, even though they can be agitating to me sometimes. And it just helps us to get centered in this moment, to become present. And presence is one of the greatest gifts for us as a human, but also the greatest gifts to give a partner in a relationship, because it's basically being with them in this moment instead of up in our heads imagining what the next moment's going to be like, or imagining a story about why she's saying this, why she's saying that. The reality is, Henry, we find a lot of men have no idea how to be present. They're so used to living up here in the swirling thoughts of the monkey mind that they go right up there. They start experiencing emotional pain because those monkeys are saying, "What? How could she say that? You know what that means? It means she doesn't respect you." And so men get all wrapped around the drive shaft. And when they do that, they become irate. They lose the moment. They're living up in their heads. Their partner feels disconnected, and it turns into a complete moment of chaos. And so the transition you need to learn to make, once again, is to move from being irate to being intrigued. And your tool for that, Henry, is presence. All right, let's talk about the next one. The third shift that you need to make is to learn to stop being indignant and start being infusive. Now, a lot of people don't use the word infusive in everyday speech, but because I like to use all words that started with I or IN. I was like, I had to find one that worked, right? And infusive means that you have the ability to infuse. And you might say, well, infuse with what? Well, first, let's talk about the indignancy, right? There's a lot of indignant kind of tone to your comment. And I get it. It's the emotional reaction of how dare she have these opinions and say these things, right? And that comes from our own internal stories where we deserve certain things. We're entitled to certain things like her undying love, appreciation, respect, admiration, physical affection, and so forth. And we get indignant when a partner has a question because we read all this story into it like, hey, they shouldn't ask me that, right? And we're feeling the emotional turmoil of really what I've talked about in the prior steps. And so you have to transition from this feeling of being indignant in moments like this and in the relationship to seeing yourself as having a responsibility to be infusive. Now, to be infusive, you need a tool, like I promised you for each of these. The tool for being infusive is something we call in our community unconditional high regard. That means the regard you give other people is not borrowed or motivated or defined by the people. You see, if I don't have unconditional high regard, I have conditional regard. And that means I only show you kindness if you're showing me kindness. Now, a lot of people say, well, what's wrong with that? Well, here's what's wrong with that. Imagine if I said, Henry, give me $1, and you give me $1. I say, Henry, give me another $1, and you give me another $1. I say, hey, Henry, here's $2, right? Am I some sort of good guy because I just gave you $2 back that you gave me? No, I'm not doing anything remarkable there. I'm not doing anything particularly noble or virtuous. I'm simply returning to you what you gave to me. And yet this is exactly how a lot of people believe loving relationships work, that I only return to the person I love what they give me in love. Well, that is a messed up way to be, and it's very transactional, and it ends up resulting in something we like to call ledger keeping, where you're like, hey, they gave me $1 this day, they gave me $1 that day, I gave them $5 and they owe me $3. And that's exactly how people start to live in their marriage relationship, and nothing will sour and kill your relationship faster than a transactional regard system. And so an unconditional regard system looks more like this. Hey, Henry, here's $1. Hey, Henry, here's $10. Hey, Henry, here's $8. Hey, Henry, here's $100. Where I'm giving you from my account what I want to give, what I enjoy giving based on my value system, who I like to be. I'm a generous man, so I'm going to just give, right? And the reason I'm giving generously is not because or motivated by how you're treating me in an unconditional high regard system, but simply by my virtue, my value system, and who I enjoy being. And the great thing about that is it eliminates the ledger. I don't have to keep track of tit for tat and what you're doing, what you're not doing. I don't have to judge your actions, how you're using your time, how you're using your affection, how you're using your energy. I just simply live in the space of who do I like to be? And that's exactly how I'm going to be. And if you're in a rotten mood today, Henry, I'm going to be the same way. If you're in an awesome mood tomorrow, I'm going to be the same way, because what I have done is broken the dependency on the object of my love as being the source of my love, which doesn't work. It always leads to heartache. It always leads to a cancerous effect on the relationship. And the way to break that whole spell of that dependent, transactional, ledger-keeping love is to inject the tool of unconditional high regard. It's our belief and experience that the best and most suitable person to do this in a relationship is the man. Because when you're in a relationship where both partners are showing each other conditional regard, somebody has to break that cycle and go first in injecting a new thing, infusing a new tool into the relationship. That tool for you, Henry, is unconditional high regard. That will help you to infuse your relationship with better things. Now, men tell us all the time when they learn this one transition that turns everything around, because about 8.5 to 9 times out of 10, when a man injects unconditional high regard into a relationship consistently, and it takes a little while to build up momentum and to actually create the impact he wants. When men do that, it invites the partner in his life to start doing the same. It's not instant. Like I said, it takes some time for her to feel the effects of that change from a transactional ledger-keeping love to an unconditional high regard kind of love. But when a man does that, when he infuses the relationship with that, it tends to create great things in the relationship and in his life. So that transition, one more time, Henry, is moving from being indignant to moving to being infusive. And the tool for that is unconditional high regard. All right, let's talk about the fourth one. This is one men hate, okay? And that is moving from being inconsistent to moving to being impeccable. Now, every man has a love-hate relationship with inconsistency. Men recognize that they're inconsistent, and it pains them and it frustrates them. And a part of them, they always say, wants to be more consistent. Yet a part of them also resents that there is more space to improve in the consistency department. And so most men tend to be defensive and argumentative and say, well, what about her? And they just immediately start deflecting when you talk about their inconsistency to talking about their partner's inconsistency. Well, you know what? There's 8 billion people on planet Earth. And if I have to wait for all of them to be more consistent before I look at my own inconsistency, I'm still going to be miserable. I still have a need as a human, if I want to live a good life, to be more consistent. Nobody is actually really harmed by becoming a more consistent person. And so part of being a mature masculine man is to be more consistent. And that could be a daunting task. It could be discouraging. It can feel like it's a never-ending goal. And to be honest, it is, because there's almost always more room for us as men to be more consistent. And so we need to become consistent, though. We need to replace our inconsistency with being impeccable. Now, impeccable means just that a lot of people think it means perfect, but it really doesn't mean to be perfect. It means to be on this journey of doing your best and being consistent with what you say, with what you do, with what your actions are. And your tool here is consistency and reliability. Now, there's a little bonus tool I would add to consistency and reliability, and I would say that is community. A huge benefit of being in brotherhood with other men on the same journey in these transitions is that other men tend to lift each other up in becoming more consistent and more impeccable, because that's everybody's journey. Everybody's striving together to incorporate these things in life, and they don't compete with each other and push each other down. Instead, they try to help one another, good brothers, to become more impeccable. And we see this every day in the Mentoring Men community. Now, it's important here because a lot of a woman's complaint in a relationship, not all of it, but a lot of it, is because we're simply inconsistent. We say, hey, I'm going to the grocery store and I'm picking up these 10 things. And we come home with 7 things. And she says, I thought you were going to get 10 things. And we say, I changed my mind. But to a woman, that can really foster a sense of insecurity, because she says, well, he said he was going to do this and he did that. He said he's going to do this and he did that. And all this inconsistency creates a sense of insecurity in her, or fosters a sense of insecurity. And that's because she says, well, if he's not consistent over here, like when he's painting a room and he leaves something undone, where else is he doing that in life? Perhaps in an area really important. Is he doing that with our family finances? Is he fudging when it comes to morality? Is he, when he's out of town on a business trip and he says, you know, I'm being a moral man, I'm living by my virtues, is that true? And so when we lack consistency in our day-to-day little things, it makes a woman feel uneasy, or she does feel uneasy, because she has these greater insecurities. Where else are we inconsistent? And so a woman will complain, generally in a long-term relationship, when we're inconsistent, because it's upsetting to her. It's an insecure feeling to be in a relationship with a person who's not reliable. And yet when we're impeccable, and again, that doesn't mean perfect, but that does mean a sense of resiliency. How quick are we to repair our inconsistency when we're inconsistent, right? That's part of being impeccable, of saying, you know what, I didn't hit my own value system over there. I just did something or said something that's actually lower than my own bar for myself. And so, you know what? Here's what I'm doing to address that in my life, because it's important to me, not because it's important to you, sweetheart, but because I want to be a man who's impeccable. I want to be a man, and I am a man of integrity. And so when I step out of my integrity for some reason, part of being mature and impeccable is course correcting that, right? And so the way to move from inconsistency to being impeccable is to learn to be consistent and reliable. That's your tool, and your super tool for that is to enter a community of men, whether those are around you or in a community like Mentoring Men, who will help you on that journey. Okay, we've got one more transition that helped me, Henry, and that was to move from indifference to intolerance. Now, that can be really misunderstood, and there's a reason that I saved this one for last, and that's because immature men love to just basically zero in on just this one and start demanding to a woman, man, you got to respect me, woman. If you don't respect me, I'm going to blah, 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 blah. And that's not the kind of indifference I'm talking about, or the kind of intolerance, right? These other transitions I talked about must be made and be part of your life before you really kind of flesh this one out. And what I mean here about this indifference is you've got to stop being indifferent to a partner's critique and negativity. Now, you might say, well, I'm not indifferent. I'm quite angry about it. True, but if you look at your comments, you're actually giving a lot of power away in the relationship. You're acquiescing to your wife's complaints a lot. I mean, you threw out an angle grinder. What kind of man throws out an angle grinder because a partner says you don't use it, right? I'm being a little bit humorous there, but I sure as hell would not throw away a tool because my wife says I don't use it, right? Now, again, little tongue-in-cheek, but this is an important thing here, that you're giving away power. And so you are a little bit indifferent, meaning when it comes to, push comes to shove and actions, you're actually allowing yourself to move in a direction that you don't really want to go. In this case, throwing away a tool or doing a honey-do list item. And you're doing it anyway. And the reason you're doing that is because you are tolerating some of these things. And so you need to move from indifference to being intolerant of some things in a relationship. Your tool for this is solid personal boundaries. Now, we could do another video. We probably will need to do some other videos on boundaries, because the bulk of men that we encounter have no idea what good personal boundaries are. What they think are boundaries are actually rules. They try to make rules for other people. Honey, this is my boundary. You have to start respecting me. No, she doesn't. That's just a rule. That's you attempting to try to make another human being do something. True intolerance, the good kind we're talking about here, is to say, I'm simply not going to tolerate certain things in my life. Meaning, if a woman is really nasty, if she's a shrew in how she's behaving towards me, and I'm being a guy who is infusive with high regard, I'm being a guy who's impeccable, I'm being a guy who's immune, being a guy who's intrigued. If I'm living like that day in, day out, I'm consistent in those things. I'm a calm, confident, grounded, secure, masculine man. If I'm living as that, I am going to be intolerant of certain things in the relationship. I know who I am, and I'm not going to tolerate a relationship that is really going in a totally different direction than I have in mind for myself. And so intolerance here is being unwilling to keep going in a direction that is out of line with your integrity. So if you're a man of integrity and you're living in this way that you love to live, and you're walking beside a partner who the way they want to live includes kind of endless snarkiness and nastiness and critique and contempt, it's on you, not the partner, to change. It's on you to live by your boundaries and go a new direction. Now, I'm not saying that means divorce. Sometimes that just means the new direction is saying, honey, the way you're being right now in this moment is not okay with me. And so I'm going to go in the other room. I'm going to go outside. I'm going to go into town, I'm gonna go for a walk, and when I come back, I'd like to try again. And being consistent again in that kind of approach where you simply become intolerant of being in moments where somebody is being towards you in a way that is undermining you, that is low regard, that is just nasty. Now you've got to decide what that is, right? And again, we're not going to get into the depth of the ins and outs of boundaries. We actually cover that in our deeper mentoring program, which we can talk about maybe if you have a one-on-one call with us or something. And so, Henry, those 5 transitions have been kind of key pivots to move from areas that were undermining myself and my relationship into areas that have really greatly improved my life as a man and greatly improved not just my marriage relationship, but all my relationships. Those 5 transitions each had those 5 tools, and they're really just the beginning. Those things are really there just to help you get an idea what kind of things you need to be thinking about in order to make this shift. Now, that's just a 25-minute video or so, and I know that's a long video, but we have a lot more to say about all these subjects. In fact, we have so much material to help men through these transitions, through these deep transformations of self and relationship, that we actually have a 2-year mentoring program. Now, that 2-year mentoring program is broken up in 4 parts. And it's not something men need to commit to all at once or anything like that, but I would highly recommend that you consider both joining our community and consider starting that 2-year journey. Now, that 2-year journey, the first 6 months, is something called the Renewed Masculine Man. And what that is about renewing your own sense of self, your own heart and mind, so that when a woman is critiquing you, when she is agitated, you're not taking it personally, you're not actually feeling hurt, you feel emotionally resilient, and you don't lose your sense of self, right? It's that first transition we talked about. And we help men to experience that in spades. Men tell us all the time when they're done that, just how completely transformative it was in their life. And for many men, that goes a hugely long way towards turning their relationship around. Now, we have those other 3 chunks. I'm not going to talk about them in this video because they're not pertinent to what you've got going on in this space of the toxic critique and negativity. But I would highly recommend that Henry, if these things resonated with you, that you pursue that a little further. If you're not Henry and you're watching this video and you're saying, wow, this is kind of helpful, where do I find out more? That's what I'd recommend. And so you can find out more by scrolling down and looking in the video description. You're going to see a couple links. Okay, the first link you're going to see is about setting up a one-on-one call with myself or another mentor in the Mentoring Men community. You'll see a link for that. Click that. It's a questionnaire. It takes like 7 to 8 minutes to fill out. It'll kind of help us to figure out where you're at, what you need, and we will follow up with an invitation to speak with one of us. The second link will be a link to our community, a community that you could sign up. You could enter conversations like this with us and with other men on this same journey. That community is available just for men. It's private. It's in a space that's ad-free. There's no other BS in that community. It's just all men talking about this kind of stuff. The cost for that, $25 a month. The last link you'll see is a link to that 6-month program I mentioned. That's called the Renewed Masculine Man. You can find out more about that in that link. And all 3 of those will give you some idea of just what we have to offer. With that, Henry, sorry you had to throw away your ankle grinder. Sorry that you're feeling like you're feeling lately. I just want to encourage you to just keep your chin up, keep going, grow by this, and you'll like where you end up. Again, I'm Sven Masterson. I'll talk to you in another video. Take care.